Morning, Glory America. That's Van Morrison. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway. Van Morrison and Eric Clapton playing this morning. I am prompted to begin the show with Van Morrison and Eric Clapton because of a very long piece in the Washington Post this morning. What happened to Eric Clapton? The guitar legend has long been inscrutable, but his COVID turn has friends and fans puzzled like never before. So Eric Clapton is anti-lockdown. He's also somewhat suspicious of the vaccine, though he was vaccinated. He had very bad effects from the vaccine, so he's not quite an anti-vaxxer. He got vaccinated, but he's very anti-lockdown, and so he comes in for the treatment from the overclass. Now, I normally begin the rundown with hard news, like Russia looks like it's getting ready to invade Ukraine, but I think this is a perfect example of how not to persuade people to become vaccinated. I believe that you're very well served by getting vaccinated ASAP, especially if you're in the West where COVID is peaking like it peaked on the East Coast a few weeks ago. It's now peaking in Colorado. Go get a booster if it's been 6 months since your last vaccine. Governor Jared Polis, Democrat of Colorado, has done a smart thing. He said, ignore the CDC, go get a booster. And in fact, the second story today, top Biden health official pushed to make coronavirus booster shots available to all adults. Well, that's very smart. Boosters should be available for all adults. Unfortunately, Rachel Walensky, the head of the CDC, yesterday said, well, I'm not sure. And so once again, the CDC is absolute aced in incoherence. They just have no idea what they're doing over there when it comes to communicating with the public. The message is simple. The vaccines work. They're safe. Go and get them. Get a booster if it's been 6 months since you got them, then you'll be fine. If you get the virus, you'll just have the sniffles or a headache, or you'll be a bit fatigued for a little bit. Children don't have to worry much about the virus. The quarantine rules are absurd. The masking rules are absurd. If you have a healthy 5 to 11-year-old, I'd go get them inoculated, but I do not know what to do if they've had COVID because there's actually no guidance on that because the CDC can't do the good things and the necessary things at all, and they do the unnecessary things very, very well, which is confuse people. That's unfortunate. Also, as I mentioned to you, prepare for Russian invasion of Ukraine. U.S. warns European allies. Well, that's interesting. And there's some photos in the Telegraph story about this with massed Russian troops on the border with Ukraine. And it makes you think that Putin is simply going to take back all of Ukraine. What will the United States do? If we know Joe Biden, we'll know he'll be all on top of it, like he was on top of his speech at Veterans Day at the Tomb of the Unknowns yesterday, cut number 2.
You know, I've adopted the attitude of the great Negro at the time, pitcher in the Negro Leagues, went on to become a great pitcher in the pros, into the Major League Baseball after Jackie Robinson. His name was Satchel Paige.
Paige was a Cleveland Indian in the 1948 World Series winning Indians. The last time the Indians won the World Series, and they'll never win it again because they're the Guardians now. So Satchel Paige was on the last World Series winning Indians team. He was 6-1 in what was his, quote, rookie, close quote, year of 1948. He was born in, I believe, 1906, so he would have been 42 when he pitched for the Tribe. And he went on to play for a number of years, and he was, and Joe Biden, the great Negro pitcher, honest to goodness, Satchel Paige, great American. You don't have to bring up the Negro Leagues. You might if you're talking about race, but if you just want to say don't look behind you, if someone might be catching up, who knows what Joe Biden was doing yesterday. It's really kind of astonishing. I went to a terrific Veterans Day memorial, the Rocky Versace Memorial in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm going to ask Winsome Sears about that a little bit later when the Lieutenant Governor-elect joins us. But the big news is we've got trouble in Ukraine, a lot of trouble in Ukraine, so keep your eye on it. They've also got trouble in Glasgow where they can't agree on anything except that the less developed countries want the more developed countries to give them billions and billions and billions of dollars that have something vaguely to do with climate change. But they can't agree to get rid of fossil fuels because no one's going to get rid of fossil fuels because the reality is unless you build nuclear power, there is an alternative to coal and oil right now, nor will they be for 100 years. Let technology advance, but in the meantime, start adapting to a warmer planet because that's what we're going to have. There's a brand new issue of National Review out, and Roe. I'm glad to have contributed to it. John Roberts versus Roe. A story in the new special issue of National Review on the Dobbins case. I simply make the argument that the Chief Justice tipped his hand in the 2010 case of Citizens United when he wrote a concurrence talking about when stare decisis matters and when it shouldn't matter at all. When you read what his Citizens United concurrence said, the Chief Justice should not be with Roe for all the reasons articulated in Citizens United. Tragic story yesterday, an Air Force sergeant killed himself on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. It's been a very bad year for veterans, particularly Afghanistan veterans who see the collapse of the country. Check in with your friends and your family members who fought in that or any war just to make sure how they're doing. This happens, unfortunately, every day somewhere in the United States with a veteran of combat. And the Pentagon is aware of it. The United States government is aware of it. They're doing what they can, but they're not very good at it. It requires friends and families to be constantly vigilant in the event that one of their own is suffering from depression and needs help. Talk about it if that's you. From Great Britain came a fun column this morning. When the wheels come off, who are you going to call Super Rishi? Now, you may never have heard of Super Rishi. I want to play you a little bit of Rishi Sunak. He's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, cut number 13.
Enough. I think for us as a government, it's fair to say that we need to do better than we did last week, and we know that.
Can you understand that people feel this looks sleazy?
As I said, for us as a government, we need to do better than we did last week, and we know that.
Rishi Sunak is the subject of this great column in the Telegraph. When the wheels come off, who are you going to call Super Rishi? The Chancellor of the Exchequer gave a master class in triangulation, if not full-throated apology some were hoping for. He is Boris Johnson's go-to guy, and he's going to be the next Prime Minister of Great Britain, and he's going to be a great one, and people like him, and it's terrific. People also like Christopher Rufo. Christopher Rufo joined me last night for an extended conversation. We were talking about why is the left so upset with him. Cut number 4. Tell us what you did. Tell us why the New Yorker and every other lefty hates you.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of Ryan, so I appreciate that. But, you know, what I did was simple but very effective. I did a series of investigative reports looking at the federal government, looking at public schools, and now looking at corporations that have adopted the principles of critical race theory, which is an ideology that maintains that the United States is fundamentally racist, that the world can be divided into oppressor and oppressed based on skin color, and that the United States has to be subverted through revolution in order for its citizens to be liberated. And so you're taking this radical ideology that emerged in law schools and university programs, trickled down to K through 12. So I broke a series of these stories that generated enough attention to get President Trump's eye. He passed an executive order banning this kind of training programs from the federal government. And then I continued this year, after the change of presidents, looking at education. And it sparked this, really helped spark, rather, a grassroots revolt of parents who all of a sudden could see what was happening in their schools. And I was able to really contextualize it, to provide them a vocabulary, and to tell them you're not alone. If you see some of these really abusive, racialist theories being taught to your kids, it's not just you, it's happening all over the country. And so it's become a big social issue, political issue, and one that is not favorable to the left, because the more people learn about this, the more they see it, the more they recoil from it. And so the Washington Post and the New York Times and MSNBC and the New Yorker have all come after me the last few months, which, you know, I think it's a testament to my influence, but also a kind of fun battle back and forth with these other media entities.
It is a great testament to his influence, and I am going to post the entire conversation with Christopher Rufo of the Manhattan Institute at the interview with Hugh Hewitt today. That's my podcast. I hope you're subscribed to the interview with Hugh Hewitt. Let me check, however, I hope you've downloaded the Salem News Channel as well. On behalf of Birch Gold, let me check the market activity yesterday. Birch Gold is a great sponsor of the program. If you're going to buy gold, go to hughgold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 474747 and get that done. Yesterday, the Dow was down 158, the NASDAQ was up 81. And so, you know, markets are still fundamentally coming to grips with the inflationary impact that is real, that is ongoing, and is going to stay there. There's just not going to be any change from inflationary impact. I'm trying to find the price of gold here, but it's not coming up for me this morning. I'll come back and tell you that. But I want you to head over to Birch Gold, because if you don't have Birch Gold, you are going to, there we go. Gold's at $18.54 an ounce this morning. Birch Gold is where you buy gold, which you need in inflationary times. Between 5 and 10% of your wealth should be in gold. Go to hughgold.com or text you to 474747. Rebalance your portfolio. Be prepared for the double-digit inflation that is coming, 6.4% last month. It's getting worse. It's not getting better. We'll talk about that after the break on this Friday morning edition of The Hugh Hewitt Show.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. 30 years have passed since Justice Clarence Thomas was confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court. His tenure there has been consequential indeed. He's the court's foremost proponent of natural law, an understanding that our individual rights are transcendent and come from God. This understanding undergirds his approach to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, powerfully informing the justice's unyielding commitment to limited government and equal justice before the law. Over the last 5 years, Justice Thomas has authored more opinions than any of his colleagues on the Supreme Court. His influence only continues to grow. And he's beloved by the scores of people who know him. He knows the names of the children of the marshals who guard the courthouse. He's mentored generations of clerks, treating them like family, and his distinctive hearty laugh rings out within his judicial chambers. May God bless this great, good, and brilliant man, and may he serve on the court many years longer.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Feminism always had a very strong anti-male component. Feminism was never only about women's equality. If it was about women's equality, it would have disbanded decades ago. Who denies that men and women are equal? I have not met that human being. I'm sure one exists. There are people who believe Elvis Presley is still living. But they don't exist in any numbers. It is a non-issue. There is a hostility to men that is in the DNA of feminism.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Now, what made you begin to rap about politics like this, and conservative politics?
Yeah, just being inspired by the message, you know what I mean? There was a whole lot of other influencers and people who have went through a lot of things by speaking the truth, you know what I mean? And it was almost something I just, absolutely couldn't ignore. And as far as African Americans, I mean, we've been a target for a long time, you know what I mean? And they use us for votes and everything else. And as soon as they say racism, we jump right on it. You know what I mean? I feel like as an African American, it's really important to, teach your fellow Americans and then your African Americans the truth. That's how you guide them. That's how you lead them. You know what I mean? By actually giving them real knowledge about what's really going on.
Loza, are you registered Republican?
Yeah.
Did you vote for me?
Yeah.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
This is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families through an unlikely alliance between the Chinese government and a British footballer. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans. With unprecedented access across the country, this is a unique insight into the lives of the 90s orphans now driving the 21st century's fastest growing economy. This story needs to be told across the world. At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America, because they're trying to cancel Eric Clapton. I'm going to play Eric Clapton music today. I really am. I just think this article in the Washington Post, I have been the subject of what happened to articles. And a what happened to meme is whatever the overclass gets upset with you, they write a what happened to you. And they're usually nameless, faceless people in the overclass who want to be in the overclass. So they're going after Eric Clapton this morning. What an absurd thing. Job Creators Network is going after the vaccine mandate. The federal mandate is unconstitutional on private employers. That's my opinion. Job Creators Network shares my opinion. So they have begun blockthemandate.com. I want you to go over to blockthemandate.com and join Job Creators Network right now. They are usually in the vanguard of protecting small businesses from absurdity coming out of Washington. You might say, well, it's only for businesses with 100 employees. Well, if it stands up there, it'll be applied to all businesses. And some small businesses have 200 employees and less. Some have 300 employees and less. They're still small business. They're not Amazon, right? So this idea of mandating you must require your employees to be mandated or test is an enormous cost. It is not supported by the Constitution. Governors can order it when it is necessary. Local districts can order it when it is necessary. I don't think it qualifies under any circumstances, given that vaccines are freely available everywhere for anyone to go and get. And when they're not getting them, they're making a personal choice to expose themselves to the virus. And that's a freedom thing. And the counter argument is, yeah, but then they can infect people who are not able to protect themselves if they have fragile health systems and can't get the vaccine. And I understand that argument, and those people are going to have to isolate for a very long time until we find some kind of therapeutic that will take care of them when they become sick. But you can't stop the world, and you can't make other people abandon freedom. The thin skull doctrine just does not apply here. It's a tort concept that just does not apply here. We can't be worried about people with susceptible immune systems when freedom is on the march. I think you ought to get vaccinated. I think mandates are for the birds, for the federal government doing anything beyond the military and the people that work for the federal government. So does Job Creators Network. Blockthemandate.com. Charlie Dombek is going to join me next hour from Key City Capital. I just got to tell you, if inflation is the problem that it is, you want to check in and you're a high net worth individual, check in with keycitycapital.com/Hugh. They will help you get prepared for inflationary times. They're a great sponsor of the show. And I really, really, really think you ought to give them a call. KeyCityCapital.com/Hugh. Listen to Charlie next hour. Generalissimo, are you near a camera? I got to talk to you about an urgent issue tomorrow. You see, I've got 1,500 band players coming to a high school in Southern California.
I wish it was only 1,500.
And they've got to park. All right,
yes.
So I need to put a band dad in charge of the parking tomorrow.
Yes.
Would you be willing to do that?
I'm previously committed to doing just that for 19 hours.
You know, I'm going to have a fine Saturday. Ohio State plays. I'm going to a bat mitzvah tomorrow night, a party. I've got dinner with my college roommate tonight. The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt made oatmeal raisin cookies, which are my favorite. And then the Browns play on Sunday.
You're so wrong. Oatmeal raisin.
So the oatmeal raisin are my favorite. And now you are stuck, as a band dad should be stuck. Band dads have certain duties, and one of those duties is parking 1,500 cars, right?
It's not like I'm the valet. I just have to navigate a 2-lane road that about 1,000 cars are going to go back and forth on, and about 150 buses. And you know what I like about that is that your temperament is so suited to staying calm. Oh, I have a ball doing that.
Yeah, and you're just generally so cuddly and warming welcome. All the band bus drivers are going to meet.
Let's just say I know how to project when necessary.
Yeah, have you got those little cones?
I actually have the little lightsabers. Sticks.
You got the lightsabers?
I do. I have.
Can we get a video, please?
No.
Oh, come on.
No.
Can we just get a video of you doing this? Really? If people are watching on the Salem News Channel, like they should be doing right now. Dwayne is, of course, dressed up for the occasion in his midnight T-shirt, and looks like he rolled out of a crypt. Do you shave ever?
I shave. I actually am shaved. What are you talking about?
You almost said a bad word.
I almost did.
You almost made Adam work. Well, the other thing is, I
don't know how the TVs are going to catch that.
The lighting in that particular studio is right on your forehead. It looks like.
What do you? So what? I need makeup now. I got to get makeup.
Can we get you a wig? Can we get?
Is this better?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm blinded. I can't see. Am I supposed to go to break?
Lovely.
Lovely. Enjoy the band camp tomorrow, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
And if you're wondering why people like Michael seem to have this weird agenda about the Kyle Rittenhouse case, there's a political component to this in a big way. Grabian put together a montage that perhaps allows you to understand why Michael in Sacramento feels the way he does. What drives the passion of people who want Kyle Rittenhouse to spend the rest of his life in jail. Listen to this beast monologue.
Kenosha shooter, Kyle Rittenhouse, he murdered 2 people, by the way.
Rittenhouse is basically what you would have had in a school shooter. He's a 17-year-old kid. He shouldn't have had a gun. He crossed state lines to supposedly protect property. No, he was going out to shoot people.
Kyle Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old vigilante.
Kyle Rittenhouse, the vigilante.
Kyle Rittenhouse, the armed teenage vigilante.
A 17-year-old vigilante, arguably a domestic terrorist, picked up a rifle, drove to a different state to shoot people.
Kyle Rittenhouse, a guy who's deeply racist, went with weapons to a Black Lives Matter protest looking to get in trouble. He did. He murdered a couple of people.
Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old kid, just running around, shooting and killing protesters.
Isn't that amazing? And you can look at the video. The rioters are chasing him down. It's like direct. Listen, I don't know what the jury is going to do on this. You don't know what juries do anymore in America. And this jury is probably afraid for their lives because, as one caller put it, they're already threatening the jurors, the woke mob. But if justice prevails in this case and he's acquitted, there are going to be a whole lot of MSNBC pundits with egg on their face.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
So why?
Testimony, Your Honor.
Pardon me?
That was before the
Don't
testimony.
get brazen with me. You knew very well. You know very well that an attorney can't go into these types of areas when the judge has already ruled without asking outside the presence of the jury to do so. So don't give me that. That's number one.
I have to tell you, I haven't sat in front of a lot of judges in real time. I did it once for a speeding ticket in my life. I have watched many trials on TV, real ones. I don't think I've ever seen a judge as pissed as that. He actually looked, if you weren't watching on the video, he looked infuriated. He was jumping up in his seat and he said, "Don't get brazen with me," to the deputy district attorney. Look, predictions, it's a mug's game. But right now, based upon how the judge is responding to the way that this evil bunch of hyenas are trying to make... the fact of the matter is this. Rittenhouse killed 2 people. Both of them were criminals. One of them had just been released from jail for doing what? Raping young boys. If it were up to me, that would be a death penalty automatic in America. Rape a child, death. End of story. That's the reason nations create capital punishment. He got out, which is just so understanding and empathetic of us. He threatened people all day, and then he used force and threatened Kyle Rittenhouse.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of
going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Go to salemnow.com.
Yeah, it kind of did. Hang on a second. Here we go.
Your mic's still on.
Don't stop thinking about Dwayne and band camp tomorrow. Dwayne is running the band palooza that is happening in Southern California tomorrow. He's the traffic guy. So Sonny Bunch, our movie critic, is coming in, not to his usual music, Sonny Bunch, but we're celebrating band dads everywhere, directing thousands of buses and vehicles to a giant band palooza in Southern California. And Dwayne is the guy with the... You know those people on the airplanes or on the runways when they have the lightsabers and they direct traffic?
Sure.
Well, that's what Dwayne's doing tomorrow for 14 hours. So he's really looking forward. He's looking forward to tomorrow.
I'm sorry. You have to explain Van Palooza. I don't understand what that means exactly. Is it just
a band
palooza with their vans?
Yeah, no, a band. The high school band.
They actually have a tournament, marching band tournament, featuring 35 schools all having a band tournament off.
And so you see, it's sort of like medieval times, only with trumpets and bassoons.
Gotcha.
You don't have bassoons in a marching band.
I think they do. You might be ill-informed there. Sonny Bunch, welcome. All Things Sonny, available at Sonny Bunch on Twitter. He also is the host of Across the Movie Aisle, a great podcast on movies. The Bulwark Goes to the Movies, and many other fine things. So, Sonny, you are not sending us to a Band-a-Palooza, I hope, tomorrow. I hope you have something for us to see in the theaters.
Well, we could talk about Drumline. I feel like that's a Band-a-Palooza sort of movie, right?
So's American Pie.
Competition of drumming, groups. So what's coming out? All right, so we're in that weird stretch where we have a Marvel movie out the weekend before, which means that nobody wants to release a movie this weekend because nobody wants to compete, in either of the first two weekends with the Marvel movie. So in theaters, your options are a little bit light right now, but Netflix is not scared of Marvel. They are releasing one of their big blockbuster movies of the year this weekend. It's called Red Notice. You probably haven't seen any ads for it because they don't show ads, but it is a big $200 million heist by way of Indiana Jones-style movie starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, and Gal Gadot as a trio of thieves. Well, technically, Dwayne Johnson is playing an FBI agent who's trying to clear his name. Ryan Reynolds is an art thief, and Gal Gadot is another art thief. A competing art thief. They are trying to steal or recover 3 eggs, the eggs of Cleopatra, which are these ancient artifacts, not a real artifact, but ancient artifacts from Egypt that were given to Cleopatra on her wedding day, and they're priceless. They're very valuable, and they're trying to recover these. Dwayne Johnson, so he can clear his name, the 2 art thieves, Ryan Reynolds and Gal Gadot, so they can sell them to a Egyptian businessman who wants to give them to his own daughter as a wedding gift. Okay, that's the plot. The plot doesn't matter for this movie. What matters about this movie is that it feels as though it was created by an algorithm somewhere in Netflix's basement. I mean, you have arguably the 3 biggest movie stars in the world in Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds and Gal Gadot. Maybe you could switch in Scarlett Johansson for Gal Gadot. I don't know. You have a plot that I would describe as, again, it's like The Sting by way of Indiana Jones. There are even some Nazis in this movie. There's Nazi treasure to be found.
Oh my gosh, isn't that close to copyright infringement?
It's not far off. It's not far off. And you take all these things and you throw them together in a blender. You have it directed by this guy. His name is Rawson Marshall Thurber. He's probably best known as Dwayne Johnson's in-house writer-director. He also did Skyscraper, the Dwayne Johnson movie, and he did Central Intelligence, which is the movie with The Rock and what's his name, the comedian Kevin Hart, who is a perfectly competent Michael Bay knockoff action filmmaker. He's no great shakes, but he's fine. And you make this thing, and it's the sort of thing that when you put it on the front page of Netflix, and 200 million people see it see that on their screen in a weekend, they're like, yeah, I'll give that a shot. Why not? I'm in for the weekend. It doesn't matter. It's the sort of thing that gets watched by they will 100. There's a 100% chance that Netflix puts out a press release sometime in the next 3 days that says something along the lines of 95 million people watched at least 2 minutes of Red Notice, and that's why it's a big success for us. That's why it justifies the $200 million price tag. It's going to be the most watched, least remembered movie of all time. I saw this movie on Monday. I went to it. It's playing in a few theaters right now. Just because I think Netflix wants to keep Dwayne Johnson.
Are they trying to get an Oscar nomination for the score or something?
No. There's nothing. There is. Like I said, I saw it on Monday. I can't remember a single line from the movie. I can't remember a single line from the movie. There's nothing approaching an interesting visual shot in this. There's no big bravura action sequence that people are gonna be talking about on the way home. It's not even like fun, ridiculous like the Fast and Furious movies, right? There's nothing over the top and awesome. There's no real great spectacle. There's no really amazing action sequence. It is just perfectly competently done. Now,
okay, I want to contrast this, Sonny. I want to go into the off-script Sonny Bunch. If I said to you, give to me a quiet little movie that is hung with you for decades, that you like and you want to find again, in the title about which you can't really even remember correctly, but you know it was a fine film. To contrast with Rud One Dom, whatever you just told us about, the name of which I can't remember.
Red Notice. See,
Red Notice.
It even has a boring, flat name. Nobody can remember.
There's Red Dawn and there's Big Red One, but the idea of Red Notice, it's like it should be a communist movie.
Yeah, you would think, like Red Corner, right? The Richard Gere movie,
or the Red Violin. There are a lot of good Red movies.
Yeah. I can't remember if we talked about Last Night in Soho at all, but that's out in theaters right now. It's still in theaters for a bit. That might be worth checking out. It's the Edgar Wright movie. It is a horror movie, Hugh. You might not love that.
No, not gonna go
but
for it.
It's very stylish. It's a kind of horror thriller about a young woman at college in London who sees ghosts. There's kind of a sixth sense thing going on there, and she kind of transports mentally back in time to swinging 60s London. It's interesting. I don't want to spoil too much, but you should if folks are looking for something.
Well, wait. How much of a horror movie is it? Is it a thriller or is it a horror movie?
It's definitely a horror movie. I mean, there are ghosts and murders. It's not fair. I would not describe it as a thriller. I wouldn't want you to go in expecting a Fatal Attraction or a Basic Instinct.
But I really love London, and I got Jones for the London 60s scene, which I was too young to enjoy, but I can distantly remember Twiggy, right?
You might look if you just want a vibe to 60s London, then this might be a good movie for you to check out. But I don't want to get accused of a failure to warn. There is some pretty rough violence, and again, there are ghosts in this. There are scary.
I don't mind ghosts, provided they're not like demons.
they're pretty demonish. They're pretty demonic in this movie. I know your taste, Hugh. I think that you will like, I think, the 60s London stuff, but you might not love the ghosts.
So, okay. Do we got anything else? Because you talked me out of the Eternals. You just talked me out of Soho something or other. I don't want to watch Red Dawn Notice.
Yes.
What do I want to watch?
Well, there's a movie. It's a tricky one to recommend because it's a slightly awkward movie. It's called The Beta Test. It's on VOD now. You can find it on VOD, video on demand, for rental and for purchase, I believe. It is the best way to describe it is it's like an indie Basic Instinct crossed with The Social Network. It is about a movie agent who is offered a no strings attached sexual encounter with a stranger. He's about to be engaged, but he is intrigued by this offer. He goes and takes the stranger up on the offer, and the rest of the movie is him trying to figure out why this happened and what happened to him. But on top of that, that's the window dressing. The movie is really about the world of social media in which we live. It's a critique of that, but it's also a critique of the ecosystem of Hollywood. I mean, really, the story here is about this agent and his agency and the packaging fight that they were having with the Writers Guild. I mean, I don't know. It's too complicated to get into in depth here, but there was a big fight between the mega agencies and the Writers Guild about producing fees and that sort of thing. But it's a very interesting business of Hollywood movie. It's a very interesting kind of a erotic thriller. It's light on the erotic. It's not like Basic Instinct. There isn't a ton of nudity, but there is some. And it's really good. I like it a lot, but it's a slightly awkward movie. It's almost in the vein of cringe comedy, like if Curb Your Enthusiasm, if you watch that.
You know what? You've sold me on the beta test. I'm glad. That's 1 out of 3 Sonny Bunch, plus no failure to warn. I'm totally warned on Soho, and I can cover my eyes and go watch 60s Vibe London. But I do appreciate the absolute you're waving us off from the Red Note.
I mean, look, Red Notice is the perfect Netflix movie in a way, because it's the sort of thing you can turn on and fold your socks while you watch, and you won't be missing anything because there's nothing memorable in it.
Who has enough socks to fold for 10 minutes, Sonny?
Well, I don't know. I've got 2 kids. They've got a lot of socks. I could fold all of the family socks in that period of time.
I was going to say that's simply. Dwayne might have a lot of socks to fold tomorrow at Bandfest, but Sonny Bunch, across the Movie Aisle podcast, as well as Bulwark Goes to the Movie, as well as everything he writes at Twitter at Sonny Bunch. I would encourage you to check that out. Let me return to the question of the day, which is critical race theory. Christopher Rufo was my guest last night. I did a podcast with him. All I can tell you is you got to listen to this fellow. He's on the most wanted list of the left. And I had a great conversation with him. It will be posted at the interview with Hugh Hewitt later today. There's a second podcast every single day, which is a highly concentrated Hugh, the best of the Hugh Hewitt show. And, of course, now you can download the Salem News Channel and watch the show. Watch every Salem show. Get your news. And we're developing new news channel programming every single day, but it begins and ends with the Salem News Channel. Go get that app today. And don't forget your ReliefFactor.com. After the show, I've got to go out and listen to The Last King of America. Andrew Roberts has a great new book out. I'm loving on George III. Lots I didn't know about George III. The Last King of America, the misunderstood reign of George III. Andrew will be back next week, but in the meantime, I'm going to listen to as much of the book as possible. I like to listen to his books. They're good for probably 300 miles. They're that big, but they're really good to listen to. I carried in Kirkman Resveratrol Omega in my hand, now in my mouth, a little bit of lukewarm coffee. The rain will end in Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C. later today, and I will be able to walk about like I like to do on Fridays. I run on Saturdays, or trundle on Saturdays, but I run because ReliefFactor.com makes it possible. $19.95 gets you a 3-week starter pack. I'll remind you about it a couple more times today. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back. It's the Friday Ravens lost last night, so we're really happy on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
I'm in charge. I'm the mob boss. Play cut 2.
Are you at all thinking about some relief on any of your mandates?
Listen, there's mandate fatigue everywhere, including with yours truly, so let there be no doubt about that. At the moment, no.
This guy is a scumbag. He is awful. Contrast that with Governor DeSantis, America's greatest governor, most courageous, and just announced his re-election campaign to become governor of Florida again. A well-deserved campaign of a man who has been overly courageous with now the lowest COVID rates in the country. Can you get if it's COVID rate, death rates, or virus rates? It's whatever it is. It's the lowest in the country.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
And that is, can you name an intelligent conservative? That's a riddle for them.
Well, they would scratch their head. Because then they're torn. If they say yes, then they've undercut their entire argument about the conservative movement. If they say no, then they know that intellectually, here it goes back to bite them. Intellectually, they can't say no because they do know that there are conservatives out there that they may disagree with, and they try to downplay, but are intelligent. Remember, there was an old saying. I don't know if you remember the show The West Wing.
Yeah.
There was a discussion, a very interesting show. It was very liberal, but there was times of conservative balance. At least they would at least attempt it. And there was a conversation one time between, I think, one of the characters, a Rob Lowe character, and then the Ansley Hayes character in the thing. And so they were talking about, how could you be against this? The intellectual, you graduated from, good schools. How could this happen? And the Ansley Hayes character make this comment. She said, "You seem to forget it was basically the Harvard Club of the Harvard Washington Club that got us into Vietnam." And just making those kind of comments that bring it up, the fact that just because of establishment elitism, you believe your thoughts are right, doesn't mean that there's not another side. And that's the thing that the liberals can't assess to. I saw it firsthand with Jerry Nadler, with Eric Swalwell, with Steve Cohen, Mr. Chicken Bucket himself, which I talk about in the book, and Jamie Raskin and these others who believe themselves intellectually superior. And because they believe their ideas or what is right, when in actuality, they're disconnected from mainstream.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
And one time at band camp, we weren't supposed to have pillow fights, but we had a pillow fight, and it was so much fun. And this one time,
welcome back,
we all
America.
lost
I'm
our
Hugh
music,
Hewitt. Eric
and we were
Clapton
supposed to
is
play a
in
song.
the jailhouse of the Washington Post. Dwayne is going to be running Band Camp Palooza tomorrow in Southern California. I am reading this book, The Road to Ohio State, about Ryan Shazier right now. The author of The Road to Ohio State, Doug Lemerises, joins us now. He is also the co-host of the College Football Playoff podcast, College Football Playoff Show podcast. Yeah, I'm really digging your book, Doug. And Ryan Shazier, I always forget that these are kids. Even Odell Beckham Jr. is 29, but these recruits are 17, and everything changes. Urban Meyer quits Florida, Jim Tressel gets sanctioned. It's really wild what 18-year-olds have to decide.
And they have millionaire 40-year-old, 50-year-old head coaches coming to their schools. Those teenagers are determining the lives of the head coaches. It's a lot of pressure, but it is interesting to get the family background. Sometimes you're 17, you never know what's going to make you make a decision, right? A lot of it's heart, a lot of it's gut. but it's one of the most. I always tell these guys, other than maybe who you choose to spend your life with, picking your college might be the most important decision you ever make in your life.
For a football player, it is. I often tell people, if you don't like your college after 1 year, get the hell out of there. But if you're a football player, easier said than done. Doug, the Ravens lost last night, so I'm in a fine, fine mood. I need you to get closer to your speaker because I can't hear you very well. But tell me this. College Football Playoff Show podcast. I've listened to both of them this week, the Tuesday edition for subscribers, the Wednesday edition for subscribers, and they're both terrific. So I know what's going on. The poor Cincinnati Bearcats are never going to get to the playoffs, are they? Unless we expand to like 12 teams. They're never going to get in.
Well, they need a little help. They're scoreboard watching now, Hugh. They're rooting for other teams to lose. They're rooting for Oregon and Oklahoma to lose. They're rooting for the Big Ten to go crazy. But it is a little disappointing for anybody who likes the underdog that this is as good as an underdog can do in college football. This is the best case they can make, and it's still not feeling like enough.
Well, they didn't beat Navy like a drum, and we have Annapolis people in our family that are glad that they didn't beat Navy like a drum, but when they didn't beat Navy like a drum, they plummeted. What was the most important game last week? What's the most important game this week? And what are we going to be talking about next week on the College Football Playoff Show podcast?
Well, Hugh, the herd is thinning. We're running out of important games because we've still never had a two-loss team make the playoff in the 7 years. So we're only down to about 10 teams that really have a shot right now. Michigan State got upset by Purdue last week, but it probably doesn't actually matter because if Michigan State wins the rest of its games, Michigan State's going to be a one-loss Big Ten champ and make it. So that was the big upset last week, the game that mattered, and it maybe didn't matter, except it put Ohio State on alert for Purdue this week here.
Well, we're always on alert for Purdue. We hate Purdue. I think most college football fans hate Purdue. They never win the Big Ten. They don't win anything, but they beat ranked favorites.
In the last 18 years, I think it is, Hugh, Ohio State has lost to Purdue 4 times and Michigan once. So the last 9 times Ohio State's played Purdue, it's 5-4 Ohio State, and one of the Ohio State wins was in overtime. So somehow Purdue is equal to Ohio State when they play. They're number 19 in the country. They're coming to Ohio Stadium for a matchup on Saturday at 3:30. And at the same time, Oklahoma, which has a lot in common with Ohio State, neither Ohio State nor Oklahoma has a win over a ranked team right now. Oklahoma's playing number 13 Baylor on Saturday. So down the stretch, Ohio State and Baylor are both playing a bunch of ranked teams. They both have a lot of opportunity, but they both have a chance to get upset because they're being tested like they haven't been tested yet. And Cincinnati's on the sidelines saying, I hope somebody loses. I hope somebody loses.
Have you ever watched, Doug, any movie where someone goes out on the ice? Every movie where they go out on the ice, we know what's going to happen. They get further out on the ice, they see the crack, and they end up in the water. That's Oregon and Oklahoma. Both of them are way out on the ice. We hear the ice cracking, and every Sunday I open up, because the Oregon game's usually late and I don't watch it, and I look, and they haven't fallen through the ice. Do you expect one or both of them to fall through the ice before the end of the season?
I think at least one will fall through the ice. Oregon won't get tested quite as much. They have Utah waiting for them still down the line. That's a good team in the Pac-12. Oklahoma, we still don't know about you. They really haven't played anybody. And they got Baylor, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State, which is their big rival, obviously, beyond Texas, at the end of the year. So it feels like it's coming. Something else is going to happen. It's not going to be easy these last 3 weeks. I do think Oklahoma's going to lose.
Yeah, I think the ice is cracking. Very quickly, OBJ to the Rams, good or bad in your view?
I thought he'd go somewhere where he'd be more assured of getting the ball. They have 2 really good receivers in L.A., Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods ahead of him. It's a little bit of an interesting fit, but it is L.A., baby. Maybe you want to go hang out.
And Ravens lost last night. I will look forward to my Orange and Brown podcast today, to my Buckeye Talk podcast, but especially to the College Football Playoff Show podcast, and kudos on the road to Ohio State. It makes my Thursday night reading excellent. Doug Lemerises, thank you from Cleveland.com. I'll be right back. America, hour number 2 of the Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. We talk football and movies every Friday, and then we go for the juggler, politics. Stay with us.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Well, first I would ask, what city is Ron living in? Because when you look at Los Angeles and San Francisco, these are the states which offer the most, healthy financial incentives for homeless to relocate to our cities. I'm in Los Angeles. It's very robust. So just, anyone who's making under $16,000 a year can get food stamps in California, any city. And that value is about $240 a month. And then, additionally, there's SSI, SSDI. And so we're finding that homeless can get anywhere from, $900 to $1,400 a month. Now in San Francisco, what they did was they had COVID supplemental income and employment. This was during the COVID pandemic. So if you were in San Francisco, you could get, in addition to all of that, anywhere between $600 and $2,400 a month. That ran out at the end of September. That was through COVID. But you really see that, the bare minimum for many of these homeless who go through, SSI, SSDI, the disability insurance can be anywhere from $900 to $1,400 a month, and that can get a little bit more. But what you see here, too, is that, maybe Ron doesn't want to take that. Maybe he doesn't want to go the route of a disability, and, maybe he has reasons for not wanting to take government welfare. But it sounds like what Ron is really, incentivized to be here is because California offers the best and most comprehensive free health care to both the homeless and to illegal immigrants. And that's a real driver. Whether or not you're collecting, disability insurance, what a lot of people come here for is the lucrative health care.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
History-making tax and spend disaster. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And this is why people were so angry at the Republicans in the Senate and the House who have supported Biden's scheme. Did you hear Trump was giving a speech Monday night? The Republican Congressional Committee had a dinner, and he blasted the 13 Republicans in the House. I think Nicole Maliotakis was in the room. She had to be squirming, because I'm sure President Trump held back, as he does. I'm sure he was very genteel and, very discreet.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as is any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
So why?
Testimony, Your Honor.
Pardon me?
That was before the defense testimony.
Don't get brazen with me. You knew very well. You know very well that an attorney can't go into these types of areas when the judge has already ruled without asking outside the presence of the jury to do so. So don't give me that. That's number one.
I have to tell you, I haven't sat in front of a lot of judges in real time. I did it once for a speeding ticket in my life. I have watched many trials on TV, real ones. I don't think I've ever seen a judge as pissed as that. He actually looked, if you weren't watching on the video, he looked infuriated. He was jumping up in his seat and he said, "Don't get brazen with me," to the deputy district attorney.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
What? Is he charged with first-degree murder?
That's right, 2 counts.
How is that possible? It's an altercation. I mean, first-degree murder is where you're like, I'm going to murder this person and go to their home with, not some sort of bar fight gone wrong.
Yeah, so you're right, actually. That would be, what you're talking about would potentially be either voluntary manslaughter.
Yeah, that's what I never understood about this.
Or second-degree murder because it was more indiscriminate. What they're saying is, what the prosecution's argument is that Kyle Rittenhouse brought his gun because he intended to murder these BLM protesters and that he had vengeful intent. Now, what's interesting to me is that the prosecution just a few minutes ago before I came on this show just rested in this case after about a week and a half of testimony. They did not present a single shred of evidence that Kyle Rittenhouse showed up with intent to hurt anyone.
Well, but this is what I can't understand, is that the judge, the pretrial, arguments, because this is just, you have months to submit, motions to dismiss. You're trying to tell me no one looked at this? They say, wait a second. You're charging a guy who got in an altercation was, by the way, the guy that Kyle Rittenhouse killed in self-defense was like a child rapist or something, right? He was like a child pedophile or something. Is that right?
Multiple count child rapist. And honestly,
I'm not saying he deserves to die because of it, but
right. Details of that case, if anyone wants to see it, it's absolutely horrific.
This is not Gandhi, okay? Let's just.
But what's interesting though, what's actually relevant to this is that he had just been released from a hospital where he was being held on a psychiatric hold.
Keep up with what's trending.
Good morning, Glory America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway. Coming up this hour, the Lieutenant Governor-elect of Virginia, Winsome Sears, is joining us. Former Senator Jim Talent, Tarzana Joe will be along. The Hillsdale Dialogue is next hour with Dr. Larry Arnn, Dr. Patrick Timmis. We got a lot to do. It's Friday. We always have a lot of fun. We did football and movies in the last hour. I do a little finance now with Key City Capital's own Charlie Dombek. Key City Capital is a great sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Charlie is a great friend of mine. He came up to Washington a few weeks ago, and we had a long conversation about the economy and what Key City Capital does for people. I said, join me, be a sponsor, keycitycapital.com/Hugh, and they are. Good morning, Charlie. Are you in Texas, or where are you this morning?
I'm in the great state of Texas this morning.
Great to be
Well, you're
here.
up early, and I appreciate that. Charlie, we had an inflation report this week, 6.2% in the month of October. That's the highest rate of inflation year over year in 30 years. Going to get worse or get better?
It's going to continue to get worse, and we're all just waiting for when the markets are going to react. And there are some really alarming statistics, and it's not just the consumer price index. It's the producer price index up 8.6% for the last 12 months. And then in your food category, prices for meats, poultry, fish, and eggs grew by 10.5%. And then you think about energy. You know, we've cut the pipelines out, and now crude oil has risen 64% to a 7-year high, and natural gas prices have doubled. And the real question is, when are the markets going to react to these statistics? And we talked about inflation about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and largely the media and the markets kind of ignored inflation for the last 3 or 4 weeks, predominantly because earnings reports came out and they were quite favorable, with the banks reporting first. People are asking, why did the banks do so well? Well, they basically doled out all of the PPP loans for the government and made a lot of money during the COVID economy. So real question is, when are we going to see a correction?
Well, I've had Brian Westbury of First Trust Portfolio on the show quite a lot, and Brian believes that for 6 to 10 months, equities are fine because inflation services equities until it doesn't. And so he thinks there's a 6 to 10 month runway out there for equities. What do the folks at Key City Capital think, Charlie? I know you drive people to reassess their portfolio. You do a tax scrub down on them. You look backwards and forwards on their tax planning, which is pretty hard to do when we don't know what the tax law is going to be. But what about the investment? I think I've told people second tier apartment complex investments is one of your wheelhouses, right?
Yeah, I think your analyst is spot on. I don't think we're going to see a correction until the Federal Reserve starts adjusting interest rates upwards, and everyone is suggesting that's the back end of Q1 or Q2 2022. But history has a way of repeating itself, and this cycle looks very much like it did in the early 1990s when the stock market lost 18% of its value over a 6-month period of time, spurred primarily because a major spike in energy prices. And now we're seeing inflation really across the board beyond just the energy category. And the biggest thing that people need to do in my mind right now is prepare for the next market cycle and take some of the profits off of the table that we've realized over the last 4 to 5 years. I mean, stocks are up nearly 100% from the lows of about a year and a half ago. And many measures of value show historic overextension. And at Key City Capital, we do a very good job of helping clients with those issues. We do 2 things that make a big difference in how much and how fast clients accumulate wealth. We help clients recover dollars they unnecessarily pay in the form of state and federal income taxes, and we help clients improve investment performance by predominantly helping them reposition capital into passive rental real estate. And we focus on workforce housing in landlord-friendly states. Everything that we own is pretty much south of the Mason-Dixon line, primarily in Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, which have been major benefactors of the COVID economy.
I'm curious. I have Lieutenant Governor-elect Winsome Sears coming up on the program. Do you think Virginia is getting close to being a workforce exploding landlord-friendly state such that you will be acquiring apartment complexes in the Commonwealth where people can invest in those?
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunity in southeastern Virginia. I originally am from Virginia. I grew up in northern Virginia and spent predominance of my career in the southeastern market. What's happening in Virginia, as we've seen for the first time in many, many years, is we've had a major change in the political environment there with a Republican governor now, which I strongly support. But in southeastern Virginia, we now have a major shipbuilding activity that's about to start, with the Australians now buying a lot of military assets from us. And that economy in southeastern Virginia is going to benefit significantly. And there's an unmet demand in that market for workforce housing. So we really like that corridor in southeastern Virginia, New Hampton Roads area.
When you talk about workforce housing, Charlie Dombek, what are you talking about? Because I think people ears will perk up at that.
Everything that we buy is designed to accommodate a tenant that meets about 70% of the median income in any one jurisdiction. So we buy B- and C+ properties that either have not been optimized from a cash flow perspective or have significant deferred maintenance, where we can create about a 30% spread within a 12-month period of time. So what you find is workforce housing is successful in any market environment. In a recession, you have people moving out of A-class properties into R properties, and during periods when you have significant economic activity, you have people trading up into our properties. So we always have paying tenants. And during the COVID crisis, we were at 97% collected rents on average during the entire crisis. So we always have performance no matter what the economic cycle.
No, I'm surprised that because we had the national rent moratorium, struck down by the Supreme Court in the summer, but didn't people not pay their rents in your buildings?
No, we actually had very strong rent collections because our tenants were tradesmen, auto mechanics, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, and that segment of the economy has been very busy. What did people do during the COVID crisis? They started working on their old cars and their projects, and they did a lot of home improvements. So we have firemen, policemen, and many tradesmen that stay in our properties, and those people were working and paying their rents.
Charlie, I want to conclude with this. A lot of people don't understand that rental housing is going to be one of the mainstays of the economy going forward, because purchase housing, which is a wonderful way to accumulate wealth, has become almost an impossible dream for a lot of people, absent a parent becoming a co-signing, non-occupying loan buyer. What is going to happen on the demand side for apartment housing?
So you're already seeing significant price increases in shelter costs. So as we see inflationary trends, rent rates rise. So we're going to see a significant amount of unmet demand in the workforce housing category, continued growth in rents, continued growth in property values, and that's going to provide a very stable basis to the next round of inflation as well as the next market cycle.
Last question, Charlie. What do you think next year, 2022's annual rate of inflation will be as we close the books in December of 2022? For the entire year, what do you expect it to be?
I think you're going to see between 5% and 6% for the entire year.
Jeez, and that's actually lower than I think it's going to be, but I hope you're right. It's still way too much for the average American to cope with, but that's a lot of inflation.
Yes.
Charlie Dombek, Key City Capital. Thank you, my friend. Great sponsor of the show. KeyCityCapital.com/Hugh if you want to talk with Charlie, and I suggest that you do. I want to go back to Christopher Rufo. He was on with me last night. He's going to be the interview with Hugh Hewitt today, cut number 15. What do you think ought to happen in the political discourse about CRT?
Well, I think we just have to keep providing the evidence. We have to keep explaining the terminology. We have to very patiently keep building the case. And then we have to have faith, ultimately, that voters can see through obfuscation and lies and condescension. The left relies on confusing academic jargon. They rely on their own self-image of brilliance and competence and sophistication to try to bully parents and shame parents and condescend to parents, telling them that they don't know what critical race theory is, they're not smart enough to understand the terms. But what we've seen in Virginia is that parents don't like that. They don't like being treated as if they're stupid. They don't like being treated as if their concerns are illusionary. And what you saw in Virginia is that parents,
right there.
Including Latino...
You've got to listen to the whole thing. It will be posted at the interview with Hugh Hewitt later today. I'm going to talk to Lieutenant Governor-elect in Virginia, Winsome Sears, about CRT and about school closures in Virginia. Don't go anywhere, America, except over to our sponsor, KeyCityCapital.com/Hugh, or to the Salem News Channel app in the App Store. Download that. All right, go and download the Salem News Channel app and watch in the morning. You can do it on Fire Stick, on a number of different devices. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. 30 years have passed since Justice Clarence Thomas was confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court. His tenure there has been consequential indeed. He's the court's foremost proponent of natural law, an understanding that our individual rights are transcendent and come from God. This understanding undergirds his approach to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, powerfully informing the justice's unyielding commitment to limited government and equal justice before the law. Over the last 5 years, Justice Thomas has authored more opinions than any of his colleagues on the Supreme Court. His influence only continues to grow. And he's beloved by the scores of people who know him. He knows the names of the children of the marshals who guard the courthouse. He's mentored generations of clerks, treating them like family, and his distinctive hearty laugh rings out within his judicial chambers. May God bless this great, good, and brilliant man, and may he serve on the court many years longer.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Phrase. Feminism always had a very strong anti-male component. Feminism was never only about women's equality. If it was about women's equality, it would have disbanded decades ago. Who denies that men and women are equal? I have not met that human being. I'm sure one exists. There are people who believe Elvis Presley is still living. But they don't exist in any numbers. It is a non-issue. There is a hostility to men that is in the DNA of feminism.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Now, what made you begin to rap about politics like this, and conservative politics?
Yeah, just being inspired by the message, you know what I mean? There's a whole lot of other influencers and people who have went through a lot of things by speaking the truth, you know what I mean? And it was almost something I just, absolutely couldn't ignore. And as far as African Americans, I mean, we've been a target for a long time, you know what I mean? And they use us for votes and everything else. And as soon as they say racism, we jump right on it. You know what I mean? I feel like as an African American, it's really important to, teach your fellow Americans and then your African Americans the truth. That's how you guide them. That's how you lead them. You know what I mean? By actually giving them real knowledge about what's really going on.
Loza, are you registered Republican?
Yeah.
Did you vote for me?
Yeah.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
This is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families through an unlikely alliance between the Chinese government and a British footballer. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans. With unprecedented access across the country, this is a unique insight into the lives of the 90s orphans now driving the 21st century's fastest growing economy. This story needs to be told across the world. At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Joined now by the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Hugh. Sometimes poetry is perfect for making fun of things, and sometimes it has a more serious purpose. I usually try to stay away from that, but this week I've tried my best to do otherwise. There are many things that make us, but the thing that makes us whole is what no other creature has, and that, friends, is our soul. The body is demanding. Poets call it crude. It has a thirst for water. It fights its way to food. All its subtle systems are delicate and needy. It's programmed for survival. It's hungry and it's greedy. It knows somehow instinctively it really is defenseless. A single cell can kill it. It sees that fact as senseless. And so when there is danger, we see year after year the body is assaulted, and so many live in fear. The soul is more resilient, secure, and everlasting. Immune to most contagion, it flourishes when fasting. As strong when you grow older as it blossomed in your youth, it has one ever-present need, and that, of course, is truth. So when the truth is hidden, it often is today, in the dark and gloomy wood, the soul can lose its way. There is no jab to cure the soul, no man-made therapeutic, no chemical from science, no New Age pharmaceutic. Read then the words of wisdom. Believe what you can see. When disease attacks the soul, the truth will set it free. That's something completely different by Tarzana Joe.
Well, Joe, that is completely different. You're in a somber mood. What happened? Was it Veterans Day yesterday?
Yeah, well, yes. I'm looking around the country and seeing so much untruth that I have to make I see soullessness around, which I'd kind of define as hatred, anger. The soul doesn't get angry, and so I'm trying to understand.
Well, come to Virginia. We're happier here. In the meantime, if you need a happy or a somber poem, you go to TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com, TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com. And Joe, the website is working. I'm checking every week now because of
you're very kind. Thank you. Yes, it is. And a lot of summer weddings, people are saying, you know what, we're just going to have this wedding around the Christmas holidays when everybody gets together. So I'm getting very busy, which is really wonderful.
Which is wonderful. And if you need a wedding poem, an anniversary poem, a farewell poem, a reunion poem, or a somber poem, TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com. Right. Thank you, Joe.
Comedy tomorrow.
Meanwhile, not funny department. John King on CNN commenting on the inflation that is the Biden inflation coming. Cut number one.
As our economy has come roaring back, we've seen some price increases. Some folks have raised worries that this could be a sign of persistent inflation. But that's not our view. These disruptions are temporary. There's nobody suggesting there's unchecked inflation on the way. No serious economist.
That's the problem, is when you say something like that and then months later the problem persists, you seem out of touch or not on top of something.
That is an understatement. Out of touch and not on top of something. Yesterday we went to a very moving memorial for veterans in Alexandria at the Rocky Versace Memorial and the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in the center of Alexandria, Virginia. And we had members from the class of Rocky's West Point class, I believe it's class of 59, present the wreath. Rocky Versace is a Medal of Honor recipient for heroism in the hands of the Viet Cong who executed him after a couple of years in captivity. And one of the class members, fetching Mrs. Hewitt with me, and leaned over and said, that guy's in his 80s. And I thought to myself, yeah, he is, and we're very impressed. And I think to myself when I see President Biden, that guy's almost in his 80s. And it's great to present wreaths to your fallen friends and your Medal of Honor recipient classmates in the 80s. Not so great to be President of the United States. John Kerry as well. Not so great to have him as the climate czar. Cut number 6.
How, in the several months of meetings behind the scenes with China, did you bring up some of those very contentious issues, such as the use of forced labor in Xinjiang for building solar panels? How did you address it, and how did you kind of overcome that in reaching this final?
Well, we're honest. We're honest about the differences, and we certainly know what they are, and we've articulated them. But that's not my lane here.
That's not my lane. It's like saying during the Holocaust in the 40s, that's not my lane here. Unbelievable, John Kerry. Not your lane. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
So why?
Testimony, Your Honor.
Pardon me?
That was before the
Don't
defense testimony.
get brazen with me. You knew very well. You know very well that an attorney can't go into these types of areas when the judge has already ruled without asking outside the presence of the jury to do so. So don't give me that. That's number one.
I have to tell you, I haven't sat in front of a lot of judges in real time. I did it once for a speeding ticket in my life. I have watched many trials on TV, real ones. I don't think I've ever seen a judge as pissed as that. He actually looked, if you weren't watching on the video, he looked infuriated. He was jumping up in his seat and he said, "Don't get brazen with me," to the deputy district attorney. Look, predictions, it's a mug's game. But right now, based upon how the judge is responding to the way that this evil bunch of hyenas are trying to make... the fact of the matter is this. Rittenhouse killed 2 people. Both of them were criminals. One of them had just been released from jail for doing what? Raping young boys. If it were up to me, that would be a death penalty automatic in America. Rape a child, death. End of story. That's the reason nations create capital punishment. He got out, which is just so understanding and empathetic of us. He threatened people all day, and then he used force and threatened Kyle Rittenhouse.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Y lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, Padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
I'm in charge. I'm the mob boss. Play cut 2.
Are you at all thinking about some relief on any of your mandates?
Listen, there's mandate fatigue everywhere, including with yours truly, so let there be no doubt about that. At the moment, no.
This guy is a scumbag. He is awful. Contrast that with Governor DeSantis, America's greatest governor, most courageous, and just announced his re-election campaign to become governor of Florida again. A well-deserved campaign of a man who has been overly courageous with now the lowest COVID rates in the country. Can you get if it's COVID rate, death rates, or virus rates? It's whatever it is. It's the lowest in the country.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
And that is, can you name an intelligent...
Remember, there was an old saying, I don't know if you remember the show The West Wing.
Yeah.
There was a discussion, a very interesting show. It was very liberal, but there was times of conservative balance. At least they would at least attempt it. And there was a conversation one time between I think one of the characters, a Rob Lowe character, and then the Ansley Hayes character in the thing. So they were talking about, how could you be against this. You know, the intellectual, you graduated from, you know, good schools. How could this happen? And the Angela Hayes character make this comment. She said, "You seem to forget it was basically the Harvard Club of the Harvard Washington Club that got us into Vietnam." And just making those kind of comments that bring it up, the fact that just because of establishment elitism, you believe your thoughts are right, doesn't mean that there's not another side. And that's the thing that the liberals can't assess to. I saw it firsthand with Jerry Nadler, with Eric Swalwell, with Steve Cohen, Mr. Chicken Bucket himself, which I talk about in the book, and Jamie Raskin and these others who believe themselves intellectually superior. And because they believe their ideas are what is right, when in actuality, they're disconnected from mainstream.
Welcome back, America. I got up this morning, began my show prep a little bit before 5 a.m., and saw that the Ravens had lost to the Dolphins last night. So I'm already having a great weekend. It's already a great weekend when the Ravens lose. And so it's only going to get better from here. Ohio State's going to win. The Browns are going to beat. Now, you know, it's okay to have favorite radio stations when you're affiliated. When you've got 400 affiliates, you can have a favorite radio station or two. When you've got 8, you've got to be very careful. But when you have 400, everybody understands when you have a favorite radio station or 2, or 5 or 10. It doesn't really matter. And I'm not here to give you the complete rundown on my favorite radio stations, but one of them, the WGAN in Portland, Maine. And WGAN in Portland, Maine is really it's one of the jewels of the crown of the Hugh Hewitt Show affiliates. It's on AM 560 and FM 98.5. But there is one drawback. It is staffed entirely by Patriots fans. Now, this is a problem. I spend time in Maine. My brother-in-law lives up there. We go up to Maine quite a lot. And I spend an increasing amount of time in Maine. And it's a great place to live. But you are surrounded by Red Sox and Patriots fans. Now, Red Sox fans are endemic. They are the Lyme disease of the sports world. They're everywhere, and they're particularly concentrated in New England, and they're very, 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 very annoying people. And so Red Sox fans are always wearing their Red Sox hat and moving around, and now I got to get new Guardians gear to just make sure I'm up there with them. But the Patriots are an organized crime family, and I think we all know that, and they have been. Now, one of their capos went down to Tampa Bay, but that doesn't change the reality of the fact that Bill Belichick is still in charge up there. So WGN had asked me to go on this morning early because they know that the Browns are going to take apart the Patriots, and I could not do it on AM 560 this morning. And I just want to say to all of my Portland fans and to all of my Portland listeners that whether you're on 98.5 WGN or AM 560 WGN, just brace yourself. Just brace yourself. It's not going to go well for you in Foxborough this weekend, and it's going to go very well for the Browns post OBJ, and I wish him well with the Rams. He signed with the Rams last night. He'll be great with the Rams. He'll be their number 2 wideout threat, not their number 1, and they've got Matt Stafford gunning for that Super Bowl that eluded him for, how long has Matt Stafford been playing? 30 years in Detroit? And so Matt Stafford finally got to go to the Rams and play for postseason. They're having a great season, and OBJ will be great with him in that offense, not so great in the Kevin Stefanski, Baker Mayfield high-efficiency workout offense, but the high-efficiency workout offense is going to be great this weekend with DPJ, Donovan Peoples-Jones, a Michigander who's been recovered from his Michigan period of time. So that's the football rundown for this weekend. It began with a great win last night by the Miami Dolphins, of all people. If Senator Rubio were to call in, it would be great. Now I'm joined by the Lieutenant Governor-elect of the great state of Virginia, Winsome Sears. Good morning, Madam Lieutenant Governor-elect. Great to have you on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning. It's a great day in our Commonwealth of Virginia. Good morning to your listeners.
I got to vote for you. So did the fetching Mrs. Hewitt. I'm so excited that we got to vote for a Marine Corps veteran. I did not know that you were married to a Marine Corps veteran until election night. That somehow alluded to me. So let's start with the most important thing. Yesterday was Veterans Day. I went to a veterans Day Memorial in Alexandria, Virginia. There weren't enough Marines there. There were lots of Army and Navy, but not enough Marines. How did you meet your husband, and tell us about your Corps career?
Well, actually, I met my husband after I got out of the Corps. I was a corporal, and he was an officer. And, you know, in the Marines, very frowned upon fraternization is. And so, yeah, but no, I met him out of the Corps, and I wanted to see, I didn't even tell him I had been in the Corps because I wanted to see what kind of character he would be. So, but, you know, we've got 35 years under our belt, so I think we're going to have to keep each other. It's too late now.
Yeah, I got 4 years ahead of you, but the fetching Mrs. Hewitt is stuck with me. She can't get rid of me now. So, Lieutenant Governor-elect Sears, what is the agenda? What have you talked to Glenn Youngkin about helping him with the most as Commonwealth of Virginia? And I am one of your constituents. What's going to happen in the Commonwealth if you get any kind of say in it?
Well, I got to tell you, the beauty of having the whole ticket win as well as the House is that now we can be moving things along in a much better way without the racial intonations, without the constant contradictions of putting employers against employees, you know, $15 an hour when there is no economic reason for it. And so now we've got to fire people in order to get it up to 15, that sort of thing. Glenn has a plan that's called his Day One plan. And as I have said, I don't know if we're going to make it to Day 2 because he's going to work us to death on Day 1 alone. We've got to get the veterans. As you know, we've got about 800,000 veterans in Virginia, and we tax their benefits. He's got a plan to ensure that within 4 years we get up to getting rid of that tax on their benefits. Then we are going to bring in innovative charter schools. Most people don't know that public charter schools are public schools, and so they fight against it. They worship the building instead of the child, and we're not going to just keep throwing money at bat. And so he's going to take care of that. And in fact, I put in a charter school bill 20 years ago when I was first in office, but we were stopped, although it passed, we were stopped through the Board of Ed Regs, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, let's pause there for a moment, Lieutenant Governor-elect Sears. The appointments of the Secretary of Education and the Superintendent of Education are, I think, the two most important that Governor Youngkin, when he becomes Governor Youngkin, makes. Have you counseled with him on who those individuals ought to be and what their orientation ought to be towards charter schools?
Well, Governor-elect Youngkin, oh boy, do I love saying that. Governor-elect Youngkin has promised us he's going to fire the current superintendent. Day one, fire this current superintendent. Now, I believe he's going to have at least 2 appointments almost immediately on the board because, you know, they roll off.
Yes.
But the board has been stacked now for the past 8 years with all Democratic appointees. So it's going to take him probably all 4 years unless somebody moves out of their own volition. But we can't really get rid of the policies that we have unless we get rid of some of the laws that we have, you see, because what they're doing is implementing the laws, which is why we needed the House, because we've got to bring back some of that and get rid of it, for example, CRT. And, you know, unfortunately, this left-wing media has been gaslighting us to let us know that, well, there is no such thing as CRT, when we have seen with our own eyes that back in 2015, the Virginia State Board of Education put it on their website and put books recommending the reading of such and the teaching of such. And we have other proof. So he's going to make sure that, you know, we get rid of all this nonsense and actually teach our kids because, Hugh, it goes even further than Virginia, this is about America. You saw what's happening in China. They threw up that hypersonic missile that General Milley said he was shocked. Are you kidding me? You are the chairman, and you're shocked that your enemy did this? So
I've got to ask you, Lieutenant Governor-elect Sears. I had Christopher Rufo on last night. He'll be on the webcast, the podcast with me today at the interview with Hugh Hewitt, and I played a couple of segments of it. Chris Rufo is drafting a transparency bill. He believes the most important thing for parents is to see what the curriculum is, what teachers are teaching, not to have cameras in the classroom, but to know which books. If you really are opposed to CRT, you just want to know what the curriculum is, because they're not going to label something CRT 101. I'm a graduate of 12 years of Catholic school, and Catholicism was in every minute of every hour of every day I spent in school, but it wasn't like Catholic chemistry and Catholic physics. It's just a Catholic school, so a CRT school is the same way. He wants transparency in the curriculum. I think that's a great bill. Will you be championing something like that?
Well, I would be, except I don't get to vote unless it comes to a tie vote, and then I can have my way in that. But absolutely, we don't want to get rid of history. I mean, come on. We have to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, everything, so that we don't repeat it. That's not the issue. The issue is that you're pitting one race of child against another race, and, we all know it's one race, but just for conversational purposes. You tell the white child you're an oppressor, your mommy and daddy are oppressors, and you've always been oppressors, and then you tell the black child you're a victim, you've always been a victim, and, it kills the spark in the black child, it demoralizes the white child, and what does that do for school, the environment? It's poisonous. And then the Democrats get to swoop in as the political saviors and give us yet another program to overturn what they just created using our tax dollars. It never ends.
It never does that. But Lieutenant Governor Sears, when you ever hear for example, CNN host arguing with Senator Rick Scott the other day, said at least 4 times, but we all know that CRT is not in the curriculum. CRT is not in the curriculum. It's a talking point among the overclass now to try and pretend that the Virginia results were somehow a hoodwinked electorate, when in fact it was a very angry group of moms who were very upset with schools being closed for a year and a half, very upset with mask mandates K through 3, very upset with CRT, very upset with sexual assault not being reported in Loudoun County. What do you say to that anchor when that anchor says CRT isn't taught?
Go get a clue, and don't try to make us idiots. We know what's going on. I have knocked on doors in neighborhoods in the very rich and the very poor. And let me tell you, to a person, they tell us that they want choice. They want choice. The real racism to me is the fact that rich people have a choice when it comes to their children's education. They can up and move them, etc. But when you're poor, you can't. I have a business. I have a small business. I would love it if when you moved into my neighborhood, you could only use...
Oh, we lost her. What happened? That wasn't us. I think that was Dwayne getting ready for Band Day tomorrow. Did you cut off the Lieutenant Governor-elect of Virginia, Dwayne? Because I got to live in this state. I can't have you just dumping Lieutenant Governor-elects. I think he did. I think he's sorry about it now. I hope she's calling back. I'll tell you right now, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Oh, she's back. Lieutenant Governor, that was our producer. I don't know why he doesn't like Winchester or small businessmen, but thank you for calling back.
So my point is, I would love it if I had that kind of monopoly on everybody's business. You move into my zip code, you must use my business. Well, that's what we're saying to people, to our children. You come to this zip code, this is your school, no matter if it's failing or not. Tough. You suck it up, and if at the end of 12 years you don't have anything to show for it, and you failed, you suck it up. No, our children don't get do-overs. We've got to change. And by the way, you know that public monies are going to school choice of a sort. Yes, we use public monies in pre-K programs all over the United States, and then we also give them federal funding to go to colleges, universities, community colleges. So how would we like it if we said to people, to kids, you can only go to this school and this school only if you want to go to college? But
that wouldn't work. That is a great argument. I hope you carry that forward. I hope that you get school choice going in a backpack bill like they've got in Ohio. Lieutenant Governor-elect Winsome Sears, keep coming back. A great honor to have you on the program. Congratulations, part of the great effort in winning Virginia. She's going to be a superstar in the Virginia Republican politics and national politics for decades to come. Here is relieffactor.com. I mentioned to it when she got dropped off by Dwayne there and came back. It is a great sponsor of the show. I already took it today after the program this morning, the Hillsdale Dialogue. Next hour, I'll be out and about on the byways and highways of the Beltway, Getting my miles in, listening to Andrew Roberts' brand new The Last King of America, The Misunderstood Reign of George III. It's really fascinating. I've been listening to it for a day and a half now. But ReliefFactor.com makes it possible for me to go long. And so I urge all of you, get out there and get your ReliefFactor.com. If you've got it in the house, don't forget to take it this morning. I take it in the first hour, and mind you, in hours 2 and 3. Relief Factor works. ReliefFactor.com. Coming right back with Jim Talent. Stay tuned, America.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Key City Capital.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands, kill him. Jump.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build the superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
If a vote were taken only among black Americans, do you believe math answers should be changed so that all groups get higher grades? What would the vote be?
Nobody would go for that. No one would go for it. I'm glad you went to education. This is my wheelhouse. And perfect point. Just today, I tweeted out an email I got from the school announcing this wonderful culturally relevant education that they're going to move to. And it talks just about that. And it specifically says English, which is bad enough, and math, right? Culturally, teaching things culturally relevant. And I say this a lot when I talk to people because they don't get it. You're right, the number's 0. But that's why I scream with my megaphone, because no one knows this is happening. You have the CRT debate, and people just say, well, we just want to teach proper history. And I said, I don't care what label, just from my own personal way of explaining the situation, don't care what you call it. I'm not going to get into a debate about a title. What I will say is there are problematic things happening in school. I can show you proof that it's there, and it's dangerous. So to whites, do you want your 12-year-old coming home saying, well, I'm an oppressor? Do you want them being told that they can change their gender, but don't tell your mommy and daddy? Because that's happening. And to blacks who, like I said earlier, say, well, that's their problem. We don't have to deal with it. Do you want them saying blacks can't learn math unless we teach it in the black way, right? Because I think we've all been learning math for years and there is no black way. But they think they're helping. If black parents knew that, they would be livid.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
We're honest about the differences, and we certainly know what they are, and we've articulated them. But that's not my lane here. That's
not my lane. John Kerry, the Secretary of State Emeritus, now the climate czar, telling a reporter that Uyghur forced labor in concentration camps not his lane. I'm joined by former Senator Jim Talent, who served in the United States with John, not my lane, Kerry. I'm wondering, Senator Talent, good Friday morning to you, what you think of John, not my lane, Kerry's remarks.
Well, there's this tremendous naivete in the administration in the belief that the Chinese will do will agree to anything regarding climate change that they would not otherwise do. So what the plan for anybody who knows Beijing, is their obvious plan, sure, they'll talk to us about it. And they'd love it if they can get concessions from us in other areas and keep us quiet about things like the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province. And they'll make promises to do what they would do otherwise because they want to diversify their energy supply. And then they're going to do exactly what it is they want to do. Now, they may make promises to do more than that and then just not keep them. But they're not going to give him anything. They're not going to sacrifice economic growth, which they need to support the state and which they need in order for legitimacy at home because of what Joe Biden wants at climate change. It is not happening. And so,
we've got a Boston Celtics center with more courage than the climate czar. Okay, we've got a cantor running around and saying very blunt things about the Chinese concentration camps and their slave labor and their genocide, which, by the way, is a finding of the United States government not subject to being critiqued on TV. It's been reiterated by Secretary Blinken when he was being confirmed. Why does John Kerry not have the courage to call it out?
Because he's trying, again, because they're operating under this assumption that they can get the Chinese to cooperate, Beijing to cooperate on what his task is, which is the administration's climate change policy, if they mute their criticism. And my big concern is that they're going to give in on other issues, possibly economic issues, possibly alliance issues in the Far East. And the Chinese will gratefully accept that and then continue to do exactly what they would have done. That's what they've done in the past. And
now, is he in a position, this is what concerns me the most, is he in a position where he might say something about Taiwan that would be taken to the bank by the CCP because he is, after all, the senior man in the area, as the military likes to say, when it comes to Joe Biden?
Yeah, I am concerned about what is being exchanged in conversations there, whether he's telling them things that may not represent the administration's policy. Because I don't think he is, well, I have a concern that he's not accepting direction well enough from the National Security Council, even assuming that they're giving him good direction. So, yeah, the whole thing is, knowing the Chinese as I do, I don't want them to come to any agreement on climate change because I just can't see the odds on that working out in a way that's advantageous for the United States in any issue we care about, I think is very low.
Now, the front page of the Telegraph today has a covert warning from the United States to the EU that Russia is going to invade Ukraine. That story is big in Europe. What do you think we will do if they do that?
Well, the first question, is what we can do. In other words, what are we able to do in Eastern Europe given our posture there? We're rotating in additional troops because we don't have enough, even if the administration wanted to have a permanent base there. So I would hope that we would aggressively support the Ukrainians, at least with arms and, in diplomatic support. But, yeah, we're going to be pressed. The initiative is in the hands of the aggressors, which includes Russia and China. And we are weak, and we are presenting as weak relative to the threats, and so we can expect the aggressors to push. Now, whether it will be an outright invasion, whether it will be continued provocation in the air, in the seas, to our NATO allies in the Baltics, we're going to continue to see it. And
what do you want if you could be king of the world, not queen, not duke, not earl, and you could have the president or Jake Sullivan or Secretary Blinken say something today about Russia? What would you wish them to say?
I would wish them to say that we are going to have a 3 to 5% increase, real increase as against inflation, in the defense budget every year. That we are going to build additional capacity, that is numbers of ships, numbers of troops, planes, etc. And we're going to continue working on key technology like hypersonics, but not limited to that, and that we are going to prepare to defend our allies and our interests in these key parts of the world. Defense policy is foreign policy at that level.
Would you threaten Putin in any way?
I think I would be careful about saying anything publicly, because when you threaten from a position of weakness, it can actually end up resulting in the aggression that you don't want. I would speak with our actions rather than our words. And the number one thing is to prepare our defenses so that we can increase short-term deterrence.
Jim Talent, great to speak with you as always. Follow Jim Talent on Twitter at Jim Talent, now with the Bipartisan Policy Center, one of the most respected intellectuals inside the Beltway. Jim Talent, thank you, Senator. Don't go anywhere. The Hillsdale Dialogue is next as we dive into Shakespeare. On this, the Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show, go download the Salem News Channel app as well during the break. The Salem News Channel app is must-see TV. Go get it.
I grew up poor, which is even worse than being poor.
We would have sandwiches with no meat.
My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, racist, racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
How 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans.
Go to salemnow.com.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border. Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Are you at all thinking about some relief on any of your mandates?
Listen, there's mandate fatigue everywhere, including with yours truly, so let there be no doubt about that. At the moment, no.
This guy is a scumbag. He is awful. Contrast that with Governor DeSantis, America's greatest governor, most courageous, and just announced his re-election campaign to become governor of Florida again. A well-deserved campaign of a man who has been overly courageous with now the lowest COVID rates in the country. Can you get if it's COVID rate, death rates, or virus rates? It's whatever it is. It's the lowest in the country. Pursuing alternative treatments like monoclonal antibodies. The first major state to reopen. Phenomenal economic figures, no mask mandates for children, and in the school districts that are doing that, DeSantis is clamping down. He banned critical race theory, and DeSantis has done this in a logical and reasonable way, I'm inspired by his leadership versus the weak Vichy French Republicans across the country that continually pander to Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. Ron DeSantis has been terrific. But Ron DeSantis understands the promise of the Constitution, unlike Murphy and most Republicans in the country, where Ron DeSantis says, a year and a half ago, we started with 15 days to slow the spread. Now it's get jabbed or lose your job. You see, what Ron DeSantis recognizes is that the sovereign is the people, not him. It's not we the Ron DeSantis or we the governor of Florida. No, it's the people's rights that come first.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Right now, based upon how the judge is responding to the way that this evil bunch of hyenas are trying to make... the fact of the matter of this, Rittenhouse killed 2 people. Both of them were criminals. One of them had just been released from jail for doing what? Raping young boys. If it were up to me, that would be a death penalty automatic in America. Rape a child, death. End of story. That's the reason nations create capital punishment. He got out, which is just so understanding and empathetic of us. He threatened people all day, and then he used force and threatened Kyle Rittenhouse, who was there to help people when he wasn't a community pool lifeguard. And that man shot to death the child rapist. Rot in hell. The second man, oh yes, with a rap sheet for what? Assaulting women. He got killed as well after he swung at Kyle Rittenhouse with a skateboard to his head. Not a lot of tears will be shed for that man, I'm sure, in any community of decent Americans. And then the third guy who approached him with a Glock pointed to Kyle's head, who then had his bicep blown off by that brave young man. Come on, guys. Acquit, or better yet, mistrial.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it.
Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Morning, Glory America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt here. The last radio hour of the week is the Hillsdale Dialogue. That music means we are joined by Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. And this week, by visiting assistant professor at Hillsdale of English, Patrick Timmis. And we're throwing Patrick into the Wolves pit here. For the first time ever, he gets tossed into the middle of the Arnn and Hewitt conversation. Professor Timmis, welcome. Keep your head down and you'll be fine.
Thanks, Hugh. Glad to be here.
So you're a summa cum laude graduate of Hillsdale before you went to the university and then Duke to get your PhD and master's, respectively, in English. Why did you go back to the frozen tundra of Hillsdale?
Well, I mean, this is home, Hugh. I'm from Michigan, and, I think in some ways my 4 years at Hillsdale were maybe the first time that I had felt like this is where I live. This is where I belong. We've done some moving around. So when there's the opportunity to come back up here, it was a no-brainer.
And the opportunity to teach Shakespeare. Now, Dr. Arnn, you only bring your show ponies, as you like to call them, onto the Hillsdale Dialogue. What have you to say about Professor Timmis and his debut on the program?
Well, I had him in class when he was a freshman, so I'm fond of him. I didn't think he was very smart, but he was very enthusiastic. He's a fine young man, and he's going to work out, I think. And we're going to find out in these dialogues whether he's going to work out or not.
We are. Now, what we're doing is we're launching into Shakespeare as a result of Glenn Elmer's book, The Soul of Politics. We found out that Harry Jaffa was much attached to Shakespeare. And so I thought we would be joined by Stephen Smith, but he's hiding from Larry and I because he's done the show with us before. So they tricked young Timmis into being here and talking about Lear and Macbeth at the same time. But Professor Timmis, there are a bunch of different ways to approach Shakespeare. You can approach him biographically, you can approach him thematically, you can approach him in the comedies, the tragedy, the history. You suggested we start with Macbeth and Lear, so like no warm-up, nothing. Just dump into Macbeth and Lear. What's the deal with that?
Well, I know that you guys got into Macbeth a little bit last week, but King Lear is what I start my great books class off with. You can absolutely ease into him, and if you're going to do that systematically, I think starting with the comedies is the way to go. But if you want to get right into, I think Shakespeare at his best. Going to the late tragedies is, I think, just the way to go here.
Our friend Dr. David Allen White, who taught Shakespeare at the Academy for a quarter century, always says Lear is the height of his power. And it's a 1606 play. I did not know Macbeth was written in the same year as Lear. Doesn't that make you feel inadequate, Dr. Arnn? When you think about William Shakespeare topping off Macbeth and Lear in the same year?
Inadequate. Well, Shakespeare makes anybody feel inadequate if they can read with attention. Lear, I had a class with Professor Jaffa on both King Lear and Macbeth, and I've always found Lear very difficult to make sense of, very difficult to explain an obvious contradiction, which Professor Jaffa wrote a beautiful and complicated essay about Lear. And he starts with that contradiction, and I'm not certain that his explanation of it is satisfactory. But it's a difficult play, and it's a deep, tragic play, and so it's of course extremely worth talking about.
So let's begin, Professor Timmis, with why 1606? Why does the date matter? What's going on around Shakespeare as he writes this?
Yeah, well, 1606 is an incredibly politically charged moment in English history, and particularly in London. And I think of it as not unlike the aftermath of 9/11 in the U.S., in New York especially, because you've just had a failed attempt, but what was only by the skin of their teeth failure very nearly came off, not only on the king's life, but on the lives of the entire royal family, of the entire Parliament, everyone in Parliament, and all the bishops. And this would have been the coming together of Parliament at Westminster on November 5th, and a group of rebellious and probably justifiably grieved Catholic subjects who were being religiously suppressed by James, purchased a room underneath Parliament, which you could do at that time. That changed, and filled it with gunpowder. And James Security Services found them down there the morning of the opening of Parliament, when they all would have been in the building. And within a couple of hours, you would have had essentially a complete overturning of the English political system, probably followed by an invasion from Spain. This goes deep into the public consciousness, and there's this intense feeling of vulnerability and what happens if you lose the king. Now, they've just been through this over the last 100 years. Every time the monarch dies and a new monarch has come to the throne with the Tudors, the state religion changes. There are executions among the chief ministers and clergy. And Elizabeth had provided 50 years of stability to a country that desperately needed it, and then names James as her successor on her deathbed. And there's this hope that James is going to continue to provide stability, and he has children that, unlike Elizabeth, but this brings you face to face with just how fragile that stability actually is. And so they're going to... This is the context that we're writing these plays in.
The radical Catholics intend to bring everything down. I mean, quite physically, they intend to bring down the building of Parliament, the king, the bishops, everybody down. And the invasion of Spain is behind it. So, Dr. Arnn, did Churchill ever talk about Fox Day? Did he ever speak about this plot?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's in England today and in Churchill's time, it's a sort of folk thing. There's Guy Fawkes was the bad guy, and and you if you're a kid in England in November, you build yourself a guy. You make an effigy, and you go around and you say to people, "A penny for the guy," and people are supposed to give you a penny. And so, yeah, it's a big thing, and it's the way Patrick described it is how it must have been received, because it was, all they had to do was light the fuse, and they didn't quite get that done. But by the time of, the 20th century, it's a joke. It's a serious thing, but it's a joke too.
But it wasn't a joke then. And when Shakespeare sat down, I understand Lear coming out of this. The appeal not to divide the kingdom. I don't understand what Macbeth has to do. We'll come back and talk about that. But Lear is obviously the appeal, Timmis, Professor Timmis, not to divide the United Crown.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, and this is something that James himself says to his own son, and runs very much counter to James' whole political philosophy, which is that if I'm going to successfully unite the crowns of Scotland and England and Ireland, and not just have these people hate each other, which they more or less did, we're going to need to foster some kind of a sense of a united Great Britain, a kind of a nationalism that embraces the entire British Isles, and so to divide that kingdom into three. Lear is the king of Britain, not of England. I think for anybody hearing that in 1606, that's setting off alarm bells for you. This is not going to end well.
When we come back, we're going to talk about, very briefly, the modern expression of this, which is Brexit. And even as we speak, as we record this Hillsdale Dialogue, and all Hillsdale Dialogues are collected at hughforhillsdale.com, or just put in Hillsdale Dialogue on iTunes and you'll find 412 of them. But we are at this moment, when we take this one in 2021, on the brink of a rupture between Great Britain and Europe as deep as any that we have seen in modern times since World War II, with a potential trade war. And it's all about the unity of the kingdom, the unity that was threatened in King Lear. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. I do want to remind everyone, all things Hillsdale are collected at hillsdale.edu, including the online courses, the application to go and attend there to take Professor Timmis and suffer through the Arnn freshman seminar. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. The Hillsdale Dialogue continues.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Well, first I would ask, what city is Ron living in? Because when you look at Los Angeles and San Francisco, these are the states which offer the most, healthy financial incentives for homeless to relocate to our cities. I'm in Los Angeles. It's very robust. So just, anyone who's making under $16,000 a year can get food stamps in California, any city. And that value is about $240 a month. And then, additionally, there's SSI, SSDI. And so we're finding that homeless can get anywhere from, $900 to $1,400 a month. Now, in San Francisco, what they did was they had COVID supplemental income and employment. This was during the COVID pandemic. So if you were in San Francisco, you could get, in addition to all of that, anywhere between $600 and $2,400 a month. That ran out at the end of September. That was through COVID. But you really see that, the bare minimum for many of these homeless who go through, SSI, SSDI, the, disability insurance, can be anywhere from $900 to $1,400 a month. And that can get a little bit more. But what you see here, too, is that, maybe Ron doesn't want to take that. Maybe he doesn't want to go the route of a disability. And, maybe he has reasons for not wanting to take government welfare. But it sounds like what Ron is really, incentivized to be here is because California offers the best and most comprehensive free health care to both the homeless and to illegal immigrants. And that's a real driver. Whether or not you're collecting, disability insurance, what a lot of people come here for is the lucrative health care.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
And that is, can you name an intelligent conservative? That's that's a riddle for them.
Well, they would scratch their head. Because then they're torn. If they say yes, then they've undercut their entire argument about the conservative movement. If they say no, then they know that intellectually, here it goes back to bite them. Intellectually, they can't say no because they do know that there are conservatives out there that they may disagree with, and they try to downplay, but are intelligent. Remember, there was an old saying. I don't know if you remember the show The West Wing.
Yeah.
There was a discussion, a very interesting show. It was very liberal, but there was times of conservative balance. At least they would attempt it. And there was a conversation one time between I think one of the characters, a Rob Lowe character, and then the Ansley Hayes character in the thing. So they were talking about, how could you be against this? The intellectual, you graduated from, good schools. How could this happen? And the Ansley Hayes character make this comment. She said, "You seem to forget it was basically the Harvard Club of the Harvard Washington Club that got us into Vietnam." And just making those kind of comments that bring it up, the fact that just because of establishment elitism, you believe your thoughts are right, doesn't mean that there's not another side. And that's the thing that the liberals can't assess to. I saw it firsthand with Jerry Nadler, with Eric Swalwell, with Steve Cohen, Mr. Chicken Bucket himself, which I talk about in the book, and Jamie Raskin and these others who believe themselves intellectually superior. And because they believe their ideas are what is right, when in actuality, they're disconnected from mainstream.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
This is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans.
At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. We have launched into Shakespeare on the Hillsdale Dialogues, but not too quick. I'm joined by Dr. Patrick Timmis, professor of English at Hillsdale College, and Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. These conversations dating back to Homer and up to the present are all collected at hughforhillsdale.com and at iTunes under Hillsdale Dialogue. Dr. Arnn, I mentioned before you went to break, and we're going to come back to Lear and Macbeth in a moment. The headlines this week from the Financial Times: Britain's game of Brexit chicken will end badly. In threatening to repudiate its deal with the European Union, the United Kingdom is undermining its credibility as a reliable partner. Over at The Telegraph, Dublin preparing emergency plans for EU-UK trade war. Leo Varadkar says the Irish government is dusting down the no-Brexit deals in case Northern Ireland Protocol dispute escalates. The Northern Ireland dispute is about whether or not the United Kingdom is united, isn't it?
That's right. So you have to remember, by the way, that James I, before whom this play was performed, he was from Scotland, and the constituent parts of Great Britain and Northern Ireland are England, Scotland, and Wales. That's Britain. And then it used to be Ireland, all of it. And that was a troubled history, and still is. And Northern Ireland is the Protestant part and close to England, and, you know, it's right there beside, right at the top of Ireland itself. And so Ireland is close to the European Union, and Northern Ireland wants to be close to Britain, but how can they have a border in common with no customs duties across it if one of them's in and one of them's out? And so what that means is the ancient divisions of the British Isles are coming into play here.
And in Scotland, there remains the effort to revive the referendum, which was rejected rather dramatically by Scots voters within the decade. 55 to 45, I believe, was the final vote on Scottish independence. But these ties that James tried to forge, it's been 400 years, and it's not settled.
Well, we're in a revolutionary time now, and nothing is settled, right? England? If you look at the British Isles, England is much the biggest and much the richest part of the whole, and the government's down there. And my wife is from the northwest, and that's the border area. And so the nobles in that area, she was not among them, the nobles in that area got their strength, it's in King Lear that this is true, got their strength from the fact that they could protect the border from the Scots. And so today there's a difference between them, and the Scottish people are very ready to go by some majority, and, very ready to go. They actually have never got a majority for that, but the polls show that they would today.
Well, it's something about which you're enthusiastic until the actual choosing arrives, I think. Yeah, when you have to choose, that concentrates the mind wonderfully, to quote Dr. Johnson.
Another thing is England, Great Britain is old, and that means it emerges from feudal and pre-feudal times. And now the unity of the United Kingdom, that's also old now, but they're discarding the traditions that made it what it was. In other words, the Scots and the Welsh and the Northern Irish fought bravely in the wars, in the great 20th century wars, and in the 19th century wars. And so they have a common history together, but that history, as in America, is being forgotten. And so the tugs of that old story may not be as strong as they used to be.
But the consequences of division, which we'll come back and talk about in Lear, and of ambition, as we'll talk about in Macbeth, loom large and perilous for the United Kingdom. I think that Northern Ireland cut off from Great Britain will lead to just disastrous repercussions for the Good Friday Agreement. We'll talk more about Lear and Macbeth after the break. Dr. Arnn, Professor Timmis, don't go anywhere, America. The Hillsdale Dialogue continues. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Stay with us.
Powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as is, any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference. They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars. Russians, I'm not going to be specific as.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it.
Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
History-making tax and spend disaster. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And this is why people were so angry at the Republicans in the Senate and the House who have supported Biden's scheme. Did you hear Trump was giving a speech Monday night? The Republican Congressional Committee had a dinner, and he blasted the 13 Republicans in the House. I think Nicole Maliotakis was in the room. She had to be squirming because I'm sure President Trump held back, as he does. I'm sure he was very genteel and, very discreet.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Y lo siento mucho.
That's the only time you can come to Christ. When the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I am launching a series on Shakespeare with Dr. Arnn and Professor Timmis and Professor Smith alternating. And we're just going to go very high right now into Macbeth. Professor Timmis, can you give us the quick summary so people understand why we're talking about Macbeth and Lear in the first of this series?
Yes, I mean, these are considered two of, I think, the high point of Shakespeare's career, 1606, is, and through maybe 1610, I think, is when many of his greatest, his plays are published and performed, and these two are coming at a particularly politically tense moment in the wake of a massive attempted terrorist attack, and trying to figure out how do we go forward and reestablish political stability.
And so what is the takeaway from Macbeth? That don't shoot at the king? Is that it?
I think that's basically it. James has a very high sense of the sanctity of a king. He views himself as God's anointed, as somehow elect by God to lead God's chosen people. That's very much how the English view themselves at this time, as a new Israel. And that's how the Scottish nobles in Macbeth think about the assassination of their king, Duncan, as sacrilege, as an attack on the temple of the Lord. And that's exactly how James bishops, for instance, are talking about this gunpowder plot that they've just survived.
So in Macbeth, we're laying down the principle that you don't kill kings. In Lear, we're going to lay down a different principle, which is you don't divide kingdoms and kill kingdoms. But in this, we're laying down the idea that you don't kill kings. What did Dr. Jaffa talk about, Larry Arnn, at Hillsdale so many years ago that intrigued him in Macbeth?
Well, it's important to know that that Lincoln and Churchill were both deeply familiar with Macbeth. There's testimony that they knew the play. Churchill had the play basically memorized. And Lincoln was engaged in several conversations with Shakespearean actors about the different versions of Macbeth, because there were more than one floating around at the time. And he had detailed opinions about which rendering was right. So that piques Professor Jaffa's interest. The way he presents the two plays is that the theme of Macbeth is that Macbeth is a deeply moral man who's undone by a wife who, and she uses his loyalty to her, which is also a moral point, right? So his moral inclinations are at war with each other, and she gets him to murder his kinsman and house guest to get his throne. And he is undone by that. Eventually, she is undone by that. And Professor Jaffe's reading of the play is that the meaning of the play is in the relationship between those two beings, and that in the end, they, but especially she, rebel against nature. And the key passage is that his love for her and his sort of obedience to her is born of their conjugal relationship, that is to say, husband and wife, a very deep and important relationship. But she says at one point that in order to get this thing done, she would be unsexed. She calls on, effectively, Satan to unsex her, and she would kill the baby at her breast. So in other words, she is rebelling against the thing that also makes her bond with her husband. And so they destroy themselves. And Professor Jaffe reads the play, and this makes really awesome sense to me because I love this kind of thing anyway, that the moral order is ultimately imperial, that you can't rebel against it except at your cost. And so that play and his reading of it, that all just makes powerful and sublime sense to me.
Professor Timmis, does it make powerful sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that essay from Professor Jaffe is a really fantastic reading of the play, and I think even the end of the play where these things that seem impossibilities in nature, a wood rising and coming to defeat Macbeth, well, those things start to happen, right? When you start to break down human nature, well, nature itself is going to rise against you and restore order.
Now, in terms of Duncan, do we have sympathy for him? Is he a bad king?
No, it's the point that he's not. He's a good guy, and he's just recently justly and generously rewarded Macbeth for his war service and promoted him. So, no, there's nothing wrong with Duncan.
And so is Duncan surprised that people want him dead?
Well, he's killed in his sleep, so I don't know. I don't remember him being surprised. I don't remember him knowing it. Right?
Professor Timmis, is he surprised that people want him gone?
Yeah, he comes into Macbeth's castle with total trust, and in fact even comments on how warm the welcome is, how peaceful this coming to rest after battle is. It's completely unprepared for any attempt on his life.
So what is the source of her ambition, Professor Timmis? Because if she's the bad actor who influences Macbeth to do the bad thing, and it's unequivocally bad and it's unexpected, what is driving her?
We don't see that. She finds out that Duncan is coming, and her first thought is murder. Macbeth is kind of egged on by the three weird sisters. With Lady Macbeth, this seems to be, a rot that's already set in. And I think Shakespeare is pushing there on the fact that evil and disloyalty for people in the Renaissance was something that fundamentally you couldn't explain, right? It's Satan's rebellion against God. Why would you do that? Why would you reject someone who you have bonds of gratitude and love, who has treated you well?
So to me, the takeaway, and I asked Dr. is that you can never rest secure in a human friendship. If you can't trust Beth to have a house guest Duncan without killing him in his sleep, Isn't that an admonition to all rulers everywhere and all time to keep one eye open?
Well, yeah, but it's the complication with that. I'm teaching Aristotle this term, and we're in the two books that are mostly about friendship. And friendship is the highest human association. And that means that you can trust a person if you are a good person and they are a good person and you judge rightly. However, it introduces a complication if there's a superiority and inferiority, including one of station. If you're the king, then that changes things, and it's hard to be friends. And so Duncan is like King Lear. He underestimates the importance of that. But you know, Macbeth himself, it's probable that Duncan didn't know Lady Macbeth as well as he knew Macbeth. Macbeth himself, it just takes enormous pressure to get him to do this thing. And he makes one of the most powerful moral arguments in all of literature against the doing of it just before his wife changes his mind.
But he does it. And so what I wanted to get to is that the American founding prevents our having a Macbeth moment because we don't let anyone become a king. You're limited in term and you're limited in power, and so there really is, you might be able to have friends. That's what I'm thinking, because you can't be a monarch.
Yeah, you won't be there for a long time. That's right. I mean, you know, it's a form that I admire, that if your brother or your dad or your best friend or your sister becomes president, you refer to them after that as Mr. President or Madam President. And on the other hand, no, everybody knows that's not going to last, right? You're going to, and in private, I know, for example, Harry Hopkins called Franklin Roosevelt Franklin, but in public, he always referred to him as Mr. President. So the forms are there in a nation like this because the offices are not by birth and permanently held.
And that's the genius moment. We don't end up with the Macbeth moment. We end up with the 9/11, but not a Macbeth moment. Now, Professor Timmis, contrast that with Lear, who brings this on himself. He's not murdered. He's committing suicide for his kingdom.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Macbeth, in some ways, I think, is a very hopeful play politically in that the kingdom rises against Macbeth, and Malcolm, the rightful heir, is going to return and restore an order based on friendship. And we don't see that in Lear. After the division of the kingdoms, you immediately have civil war between the three sisters. And will ultimately end with Lear dead, his three daughters dead, a number of people who have opportunistically taken advantage of this conflict and are on the make, who have been driving some of these assassinations and these murders, and then kind of an attempt to move back towards a restored kingdom at the end, but the best idea out there seems to be, well, we'll just take these three kingdoms still, and the last three people standing will rule them, kind of in a loose alliance, and you sort of know where that's going.
Yeah, well, it's kind of scary. I've seen Ian McKellen do this play. We'll come back after the break and talk about it. It's actually scary to watch Lear, and we'll talk about that after the break. Don't go anywhere, America. The Hillsdale Dialogue rolls on. Everything Hillsdale is found over at hillsdale.edu. You can, however, go over to relieffactor.com. Every single show, every single hour, every day that I'm on the air, I tell you about relieffactor.com. I think it ought to be lying around in piles at Hillsdale for the students. But what it does is use nature's ingredients, the natural anti-inflammatories, perfectly manufactured by the folks at relieffactor.com. I sat down with the doctor who invented this and the scientists, and we went through the whole process. And that's why I use it. That's why I take it. It works. Works for thousands of people every day, tens of thousands actually, take it every single morning. And I encourage you to do that, and I always remind you to do that. And if you have not yet started taking it, give it a try. 3-week starter pack is $19.95. All you have to do is head over to relieffactor.com and order, and it will come to you, and then you can try it for 3 weeks. And I think the odds are it's going to be very effective for you, because that's been my experience. Yep, not 100%. Some people it bounces off and doesn't have any impact at all on. And they're still in pain from bad shoulders, bad elbows, bad knees. Maybe they need different kind of intervention. But for tens of thousands of people, it does the job. It gets rid of those minor aches and pains, bad backs, bad knees, sore ankles. If you're commuting, there are 1,000 different woes that go with a long commute. So wherever you are, whether you're in Hillsdale or D.C., whether you're on the East Coast or the West, just go to relieffactor.com. $19.95 will get you started, and you will thank me for that. And then come back to the Hillsdale Dialogue. Remember, all the Hillsdale Dialogues are collected at hughforhillsdale.com. You can also always go to the Hillsdale Dialogues in Google iTunes, and you will find there, in order of their appearance, the 412 or 414 of these shows that we have done. That's at iTunes, the Hillsdale Dialogue. I'll be right back with the Hillsdale Dialogue rolling along on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
What, is he charged with first-degree murder?
That's right, 2 counts.
How is that possible? It's an altercation. I mean, first-degree murder is where you're like, I'm going to murder this person and go to their home with, not some sort of bar fight gone wrong.
Yeah, so you're right, actually. That would be, what you're talking about would potentially be either voluntary manslaughter.
Yeah, that's what I never understood about this.
Or second-degree murder because it was more indiscriminate. What they're saying is, what the prosecution's argument is that Kyle Rittenhouse brought his gun because he intended to murder these BLM protesters, and that he had a vengeful intent. Now, what's interesting to me is that the prosecution, just a few minutes ago before I came on this show, just rested in this case after about a week and a half of testimony. They did not present a single shred of evidence that Kyle Rittenhouse showed up with intent to hurt anyone.
Well, but this is what I can't understand, is that the judge, the pretrial arguments, because this is just, you have months to submit, motions to dismiss. You're trying to tell me no one looked at this? They say, wait a second. You're charging a guy who got in an altercation, was, by the way, the guy that Kyle Rittenhouse killed in self-defense was like a child rapist or something, right? He was like a child pedophile or something. Is that right?
Multiple count child rapist. And honestly, the
I'm not saying he deserves to die because of it, but
right. The details of that case, if anyone wants to see it, it's absolutely horrific.
This is not Gandhi, okay? Let's just.
But what's interesting, though, what's actually relevant to this is that he had just been released from a hospital where he was being held on a psychiatric hold.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Now, what made you begin to rap about politics like this and conservative politics?
Yeah, just being inspired by the message, you know what I mean? There was a whole lot of other influences and people who have went through a lot of things by speaking the truth, you know what I mean? And it was almost something I just, absolutely couldn't ignore. And as far as African Americans, I mean, we've been the target for a long time, you know what I mean? And they use us for votes and everything else. And as soon as they say racism, we jump right on it. You know what I mean? I feel like as an African American, it's really important to, teach your fellow Americans and then your African Americans the truth. That's how you guide them. That's how you lead them. You know what I mean? By actually giving them real knowledge about what's really going on.
Loza, are you registered Republican?
Yeah.
Did you vote for me?
Yeah.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
This is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans.
At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is a story of how 1 million children.
Welcome back, America. 15 years ago, I saw Ian McKellen play Lear at UCLA and was stunned by how ferocious it is and how physically taxing a role it is. Professor Timmis is my guest, along with Dr. Lear Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Lear is terrifying, Professor Timmis, is it not?
It is perhaps the most terrifying thing in English literature.
And why is that? I mean, I know why. It's just utterly hopeless at the end. Everything is crashed and burned, and you have a naked, crazy king in the wind. Mm-hmm. That's not a wonderfully uplifting message.
It's not, and in some ways it's underlined by the fact that it's not the ending of this story that people knew. People knew it as sort of a tragicomedy in which Lear falls, but then is restored. Cordelia, the good daughter, is victorious, and you kind of go through suffering and are purged. Well, Shakespeare takes that original storyline and makes you think that that's what's going to happen, right? Lear's holding Cordelia on his lap and says, if she breathes, this will redeem everything we've been through, and thinks she does breathe, right? He's holding a feather to her mouth, and she doesn't. And Kent, who is sort of the blunt, straight-talking counselor, asks, is this the promised end? Is this where we're headed? And although I think there are moments in the play where you see possibilities of a kind of personal redemption or a restoration of personal relationships, that basic problem of civil strife, civil division, I don't think that we get any kind of a roadmap for how are we going to get out of this.
We don't. It's bleak, Dr. Arnn. The English have to figure their own way out, and it requires a civil war and regicide, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I've come to a suggestion while I've been listening to Patrick. If we go through all the history plays, we should come back to these two plays and talk about them again, because they present a crisis that's fictional. They're not real characters in it. But Lear in particular. Lear is presented, this is Professor Jaffe's reading of the play, by the way. Lear is addressing a problem that proves intractable. Professor Jaffe entitled his essay, The Limits of Politics. Lear is trying to arrange for a succession. And he's got these two vile daughters and this one great daughter, and Professor Jaffe speculates he knows their characters. And he asks them to praise him in order to get them committed. And then he can make his division. And Professor Jaffe notes that 3 is the number of balance of power. 2 is always war. That's why my wife and I always thought we had to have at least 3 children, because with 2 you only get war. And so he gets this done, right? And yet Cordelia, who's his favorite and the great one, she disappoints him in making these speeches. And that means either he's misestimated her or else she's greater than he, maybe. And so the whole thing comes apart because, and remember, this is the key point. This is why the Constitution of the United States, in principle, monarchy is the greatest form of rule if you can have a wise ruler, right? Because checks and balances and all that stuff, that'll just be in the way of such a person. But constitutionalism is better because people are not perfect. And for one thing, kings do not have able sons or daughters all the time. And so Lear is trying to perform something that's beyond the human. He's trying to rule beyond his time, to have a succession.
And that is why, I originally, when Professor Timmis sent me his outline, I said, really, we're starting with Lear and Macbeth, but it's actually starting with the argument for constitutionalism. Because it's the failure of monarchy, isn't it, Professor Timmis?
I think so, yeah.
And so when you teach your students, which one do you teach and in what order, and then what do you go to next?
So in my introductory class, we start with Lear, and then we actually go to Paradise Lost, Milton's Paradise Lost, which is a post-Civil War meditation, really, on what is proper monarchy, right? And monarchy where you can rule eternally, right? God, for Milton, the only good monarch, the only true monarch, and contrasted with a kind of tyranny that is a seizing of power, and perhaps, although I don't think Lear himself is satanic, what Dr. Arnn is saying there about attempting to rule beyond your time, that's kind of what we see, right, in Milton's vision, is an attempt to grasp monarchy and harness it to personal ambitions that go beyond what you're created to do.
And on that note, we're going to come back with the histories next week. I'll get the order figured out, but we will end up back at Lear and Macbeth because it's an actual wonderful way to begin what we set out to do last week, which is we know we're going to end up. We're going to end up back at Lear and Macbeth, but we're going to travel history's path to get there. Professor Timmis, welcome and great to have you. Dr. Larry Arnn, a pleasure having you back as always. All things Hillsdale collected at hillsdale.edu. Thank you, Adam and Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. I'll talk to you Monday, America, on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.